Welcome to Fables of Our Deconstruction, a podcast where we examine our systems of faith and culture together as we grow as people. I'm your host, Dylan, and if you like what you hear, check me out at patreon.com/Dylan. If you'd like to be on a future episode, leave me a message at 515-318-7569 or find Fables of Our Deconstruction on Anchor FM and leave me a voice message. Leave your name, otherwise you'll be kept anonymous. Let's get into it. Well, it has been a crazy week. Last week, thanks for bearing with me, I was doing a bunch of different things in order to make sure I got a podcast out, which is why we're recording one this week. I didn't have an opportunity to be at my desk, I didn't have the opportunity to use my microphone, and I didn't really have an opportunity to use the internet. I was in Brownville, Nebraska, working with a variety of people in a summer classroom, and it was super cool, but it was technologically lacking for things like podcasts and other internet wonders. But we've got a lot we're already facing here. Last week, on Friday, we had President Joe Biden issue an executive order in order to try to hone in some of the specifications on women's reproductive rights, and during the same time, I had issued an episode on reproductive rights as well, and I was trying to get a bunch of people's different voices in there, and it seems like I was having trouble getting my audio to work, so I'm going to put another one in this episode. Zerin, I'm really sorry it didn't work out to get yours in the last one. I had an upload error, but it'll be in this week. So let's take this executive order apart just a little bit. So what this is, the goal is to make it easier for women to be able to cross state lines, go different places, and have less possible repercussions for traveling if a woman or a person who can get pregnant travels in order to receive an abortion in another state. Now, this is a step. I'm not going to say it's not a step, but it's really not that big, in my opinion. I think there's a lot more we need to do, and maybe this is just the first step, which I would hope to be the case, to our Congress passing laws to protect these rights, to keep women and people who can become pregnant as first-class citizens with full bodily autonomy. But when I first saw this, I thought, hey, maybe he passed some wild thing that basically punches up at the Supreme Court, if you will. It's more of a statement, in my opinion. There's still a lot of issues with anyone able to get pregnant being miles, if not hours, away from access, and that's troubling and difficult. And so I was really excited to see that Biden had done something, because as much as people on the right, as much as conservatives might want to shout that he is so wildly liberal and look what he has done and he is solely responsible for gas prices, which is not true, and we can deconstruct that next time. But he's really incredibly moderate from a liberal standpoint. Joe Biden is almost the way we would view an old conservative back when I was a kid in the 90s. And it's hard for me to see him as someone wildly liberal, wildly democratic, and so to see him pass an executive order doing anything to make access better for those who can get pregnant, it was huge. And I was honestly a little like, oh, well, that was it, when I read the statement from Reuters. But what am I going to do, right? We've got to keep doing our best to get out there and vote And we got to keep doing all the things I talked about last week. And once again, I'm going to include another voice this week in order to keep that momentum rolling. If you want to keep including your voices, I'm cool with that. I want to keep getting people in here. But one of the things that I want to transition into now, because there's a lot of conversation we can have on reproductive rights, but I want to continue to work on just what can we take apart, what can we do in this podcast where we're trying to deconstruct things. And I don't want to say I'm moving forward from reproductive rights, but I want to keep moving on while we keep fighting that battle, because I think last week's episode was really powerful, and I think what you're going to hear at the end of this episode will be equally as powerful to sort of tie a bow on that as we keep finding ways to move around. So that being said, I want to take a look at some of my past episodes. So I want to mention that I am now able to run advertisements. This week, I'm not going to have an ad, but I will probably include them going forward. One of the reasons is I am an illustrator and a podcaster. That's basically what I do full time. Yeah, I'm on Twitch doing my illustrations. I take commissions. But this is going to help out even a little bit to keep things going, keep things chugging along, maybe get new equipment on top of my Patreon. So I think that that'll be a good thing. And if we get to a point where, hey, I feel like we don't need them anymore, if I feel like they're invasive, I'm going to cut them out. But I bring that up to say I have enough evidence to see what topics have been beneficial. And, there's a lot of rigmarole with search engine optimization and writing the right text to get people to show up. And my top three episodes right now since the beginning of the year are Fable number 3. That's number 1. That's my number 1 most popular. Fable number 3, Pascal's Wager. We discussed Pascal's Wager and whether or not it's safer to just believe, because then if it is true, you win. And I took that apart a little bit. So maybe it'll be a good time for us to look at some of these apologetics and arguments apologists use to try to say, well, here's why you should believe in God. Maybe we should dig into those. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do that or not. But then let's look at number 2. Number 2 most popular episode, Fable number 1, Santa Christ. When I related Jesus to Santa and how those beliefs kind of mold and warp together. And then my third most popular episode, Fable 11, Rights and Monsters. The crux of that episode was discussing, do I believe in things like the Hodag? Like, I believe it's a cultural phenomenon, but do I think it's out there in the woods? And luckily it's a known hoax, so most people don't believe it, but do I believe in Bigfoot? I think these are an interesting illumination to avenues that this podcast could and should go. So I think, going forward, what I want to focus on is looking at things like monsters, reasons we believe, and arguments to believe, specifically in God. And when I was ideating, I've had about a week now to think on this, to consider it, the thing I really want to do, I want to cover cryptids, because I think it's fascinating. I think cryptids are a doorway to people getting involved with things like witchcraft, which I think has inclusive features that people get attracted to, even if it's not true. So I think we can explore those realms. And then when I look at Santa Christ and being like, well, Jesus and Santa are very similar, I think the problem for me, as I've moved into being an open atheist, is understanding the problem of evil. I've gotten into the mindset that Anthony Magnabosco has, that he's one of the spearheads for street epistemology. He likes to view things as harm or benefit as opposed to evil versus good. And I've tried to do that. I've tried to adopt that, and I think that's a really beneficial thing to do. And so what I want to do when we look at things like Jesus and Santa comparisons, I think I want to look at like sins and virtues, right? Because one of the things that really kept me mystified and involved as a young man, especially in middle school and the beginning of high school, So back at the turn of the century, I still find it wild I get to use that phrase, is working around the idea of like, you're doing this bad thing, and it's going to send you to hell. Or something like, these are the devil's tools to get you not to believe because you just want to be a sinner. So I think I want to look at those things. And I actually want to dive into, where did demons come from and why? And why do we associate sin with these creatures like the devil, who's skulking around every corner waiting to get you in trouble and convince you to do the wrong thing? And I think that's a really fascinating realm to go into, because when I work in fantasy and illustration, I use these images because it creates a dichotomy. One of my bigger, more recent series is representing people, models, as fantasy characters. Almost every character has horns or snakes for hair. And, I've already been told they're evil, they're demonic, but they're also humans I drew from, and they have a typically serene beings. So I want to kind of take a look at that, tear that down a little bit, and then I think mixing into those monsters and evil and getting a little darker, we can look at apologetic arguments. And one of the things I think we can do from there is we can make a little roller coaster, if you will, ride some waves where, when we're coasting downhill, we're talking about apologetics. We're talking about monsters. We're talking about evil. And when we need to peak, we can come back and punch up and say, hey, we got civil rights we got to work toward. We got reproductive rights we've got to work toward. We've got a lot to work toward. But I know there's a lot of podcasts out there covering those things. But I think I have a unique perspective on things like evil, especially as someone with a disability. I'm left-handed because of my disability. That makes me sinister. And some of the roots of the term sinister mean left-handed, untrustworthy because of left-handed. But this is the hand God dealt me. If there is such a thing, right? If there is such a thing, God gave me cerebral palsy and made me sinister. So I think those are really fascinating realms we can dive down. Once again, I'm still going to be looking for calls, still going to be looking for your stories. I'm not here to tear you down. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong unless you come in being explicitly evangelical or explicitly on the attack. I'm not going to fight back. I want to share your stories about you taking apart the things in your world and how we can do that together. Because I had a really fascinating question on Facebook from someone involved with the college I went to. He's like, are you sure you should be tearing things apart? You should be deconstructing anything because systems already exist. So you have a platform to deconstruct. Imagine deconstructing those systems. What would they leave you with? And I said, well, the wonderful thing about deconstruction is we can take everything apart. We can examine how it works and why. And then we can determine if that thing is worth putting back together. And I think that is a really powerful outlook and a potent way for us to build toward a better future. So, yeah, I think we got a lot going on. I don't want to take up too much time. This is I'm going to consider this a bonus episode, a new episode on rights and where we're going for the future. And I'm going to leave you with the voice of an open atheist living within 10 miles of me that I have yet to meet. So here's the voice of a new friend, Zerin.
Hi everyone, this is Zerin Firoze. I'm an ex-Muslim asylum seeker living in the US. I deeply care about women's rights. The overturn of Roe v. Wade has been deeply disturbing. I am very angry. Healthcare is already inaccessible for us, and the recent overturn of Roe v. Wade is a disaster on top. Many working class minorities like me without health insurance really have nowhere to go. Tomorrow, if minority women get raped or assaulted, where should we turn to? Historically, the Supreme Court has been an elite, institution, and we cannot rely on the ruling class to protect our rights. Change always comes from the bottom up. Many of these old white men, Christian, Republican politicians, and judges are no better than Talibans. If you have the time and resources, then please take part in local political campaign, volunteer, or donate for Planned Parenthood, and hold your elected politicians, accountable. Thanks a lot.
This has been Fables of Our Deconstruction. Fables of Our Deconstruction is created by me, Dylan. And please go ahead and like and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It super duper helps out. And if you want to get even deeper into the weeds, get in there with us. Join my community, the Brimstone Order. Grow your own horns. Embrace your inner monster at patreon.com/Dylan. I also want to thank Apes of the State for the use of their song Moments a Year From Now as my intro and outro. And remember, you're never alone. We are in this together.